So he's telling me, do you want to be the guy walking through life looking for worrying about, looking for how it's not going to work out? And what I realized in this is what he's telling me to do in life is what I do in my cases. Because, I mean, I think you've heard me say, I mean, I've got some weird sayings for cases, but I always tell people in cases, I always say, how can they be the defense? How can they be 100% right and we still win? And the idea of it is it makes you think beyond the problems in your case. It makes you think, what's more important about this than the problem, right? That's how we win cases. That's my, to the degree that I have a secret sauce, that's my secret sauce.
Welcome to the Tip the Scales podcast, where we discuss running and growing your law firm. I'm your host, Maria Monroy, president and co-founder of LawRing. This week, I had the pleasure of having Joe Freed back on the podcast. If you haven't listened to the first episode with Joe, I highly recommend that you start there. I do want to point out that if I could only have these types of interviews on the podcast, I would be like the happiest person on earth. I really agree with the way that Joe Freed sees the world, and I just really, really enjoy having him on, and I really appreciate that he takes the time to do this with me. So thank you, Joe. I know that he is so busy. Okay, but this time we talked about this idea that the universe is always working for you. Even if something is super painful or frightening in that moment, eventually it becomes part of your story and everything turns out okay in the end. And just spending time worrying about whether something will work out is wasted energy. And it's something that I really, really try to work on because I am so anxious all the time and worrying about things that are most likely not going to happen. We also talked about how you can control your beliefs and the outlook on the world. Many of us feel like we don't have any control over the things that shape the way we view the world. But you can actually make a conscious choice to change your preconceptions and shift how you view a situation. For example, Joe has a coach that he works with, and we talked a lot about that. We also talked about being a good lawyer. There's law stuff in here, don't worry. And how being a good lawyer doesn't always mean being tough. Oftentimes lawyers, especially women, might feel like they have to present a front of being tough, a badass, and just no nonsense. But being empathetic, vulnerable, and even emotional in front of a jury can sometimes help you get a better result for your client. I hope you guys enjoy this. Hi, Joe.
Hello.
Welcome back.
I'm so glad to be here. I heard we did a good job the first time, so.
I heard you did a good job.
No, you're being modest, but
all right.
I'm happy to be here.
Thank
for real.
you.
Yeah.
I believe you. I kind of want to pick up, tell me how this whole coaching thing is going. The other day, you were telling me, and I think it was Derek in Triumph, this analogy of a clear box and the stickies. Can we start there?
Sure, we can. It's to back up a second, I've been coaching with a guy who's been really helping me see things in new ways. And he's got little analogies that kind of have helped me. So maybe they help other people. And to some degree, when I share this with you, then you'll see why it kind of almost becomes now a language, like for my people to talk about.
Well, you know what's crazy? So Derek and I have actually talked about it subsequently, like how this helped us see certain things.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy, and this guy keeps blowing my mind. Every few weeks there's a new mind blow, and then I have to just kind of settle into it. And what's really neat is I've had a number of people, like a surprising number of people, come up to me in the last, let's just say, month and a half or so, and say, "Man, you just seem so much more chilled out than before." And I'm like, I think that's a compliment. No, it is, because. And it's my truth, and I'll share some of those things with you. But the whole analogy with the sticky notes is so, and of course I'm not saying, and my coach isn't saying that this is what really happens, but this is the analogy, right? So before you're born into the world, you're just sort of floating out there. You're this soul, and you're not worried about anything. You're not worried about dinner. You're not
I
worried
wonder what
about.
that's like.
Yeah, it must be really serene, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's just, you're just floating out there. You don't need anything. There's no needs, right? I mean, you're not even worried about survival. You're just out there. Your
I was
kids-
scared of death up until like right now.
Yeah, it seems pretty cool, right? Yeah. But so in order to sort of contain you to be born into the world, imagine you get put into a perfect clear glass box. It's like six-sided, everything is, but it's so perfect and so clear that you don't even know you're in it, right? And then you get born into the world, and almost immediately you start experiencing things and learning things. I mean, it starts off with, I don't want to be in a poopy diaper, right? So that kind of goes up as a sticky note on your perfect glass. And then, you learn that if you act a certain way, you get more attention. If you act another way, you get a different kind of attention. And each thing you learn and you accept as a belief is like a sticky note that goes up on your wall, and your parents give them to you. Then your friends, maybe you got a nanny, the nanny does, then your teacher in school, your coach, everybody, and before long, if you take a peek around, you'll notice that there's no clear glass left. Everything is covered by sometimes layer upon layer of sticky note. And so the analogy is you don't really see the truth anymore. You see the truth filtered through your sticky notes. And the crazy thing is, I'm sitting across from you. You have a wall of sticky notes, and I have a wall of my sticky notes between us. We don't see it, but it's there. So you judge me based on your sticky notes, and I judge you based on my sticky notes. And so here's the crazy thing is, what my coach says is everybody's behavior is 1,000% understandable and even appropriate based on their sticky notes.
Wow.
So for him, what he says is, instead of looking and saying, look at that person over there who's batshit crazy, right? He says, what would my sticky notes have to be for that to be how I would think or how I would act? Because, we do all know, I mean, if you think about it, we don't like to think about this, but we have all the roles, right? I mean, you can, if you're put in the right situation, you could kill. If you put in the right situation, you could rise to levels that you have no idea you're even capable of now. You could do some terrible, terrible things, from a judging perspective, and you could do some really, really great things beyond your wildest imagination. We just have all that inside of us. So the reason what's happened through this process is it's kind of like become it's become a little bit of a language. So every time I hear something that's a belief, I'll go, oh, that's a sticky note. I mean, so the coaching, in some ways, the analogy is that the coaching is kind of like what we're doing is, for the first time ever, we're peeling off the sticky notes, and we're looking at each sticky note and saying, does this sticky note really serve me and humanity, right? Like, it's not a question of, is it good? Is it not good? Is it true? Is it not true? It's really a question, does it serve? Does it serve me? Does it serve, because it used to, maybe once upon a time, it served me, but does it serve me now? Does it? And if it does, then I can stick it back up on the wall. But if it doesn't, I can rewrite it. And so let me give you a real quick example of how it got rewritten. About the time I was, floating around trying to kind of living with this little concept, this is probably at this point a couple of months ago. The coach says to me, he says, hey, Joe, do you believe everything always works out okay? And I said, no. I said, some things work out okay. Some things work out better than okay. And some things work out considerably less than okay. And he said, all right, so your assignment for this week is to write as many things down as possible that you can remember from your life of things that didn't work out, the bad, the things that didn't go the way, the painful, the harmful, whatever. And so I put myself into it that week. And I came to him, my next coaching thing, I had 3+ pages of, just what shows from my life, everything going back from, very painful things, my dad dying, friends committing suicide, getting dumped in high school. I thought of them as far back as I could. And so for 2 hours, we sat there and we examined every single one of them on my pages. And every one of them ended with a question from him. How did it actually work out in the end? Did it actually work out all right?
Like not stopping at that experience, but what came from that experience.
Right, exactly. So like your dad died. That was painful. You were worried about your mom. You were worried about your siblings. You were worried about all these other things. But how did it work out? I mean, like, fast forward a little bit and look. How's your mom? She's all right. In fact, she's kind of, in some ways, kind of come into herself in a different sort of a way. And that doesn't make it any less painful.
Right.
So it's not about having gone through the pain, but it's that it actually worked out okay. And even with things with people dying and people getting sick, and they were very, very difficult things to go through, but at the end of the day, it actually worked out all right, And so at the very end of 2 hours of going through all these things, he goes, "Hey, Joe, let me ask you a question. Does everything always work out okay in the end?" And I said, "Well, so you're still not there." I said, "Actually, I'm not. I'm not really there." And he goes, "All right, so this week, you don't need another, 3 pages. I just want you to go find something that actually hasn't worked out. You've been alive almost 57 years. Go find one and write it down." So I come back the next week and I didn't have one.
You couldn't find one?
Couldn't find one. And I challenge you. I want you to go find one that hasn't worked out. Anyway, I couldn't find one. So he goes, "All right, so now I'm going to ask you again. Are you willing to accept a new sticky note, if you will, that everything always works out?" And I said, he goes, "I know what you're thinking right now. There's some pending things, right? Like that may not work out." And he goes, I said, "Exactly. That's it. Something's not going to work out." And so here's where it all came down to. It all came down to this. He said, "You're going to have one of 2 sticky notes. And I'm showing you this as an example of you get to pick which sticky note you want to live with. You can have a sticky note that says, everything always works out in the end."
But like, what if you get sick and it's like terminal and you die in 2 weeks?
Yeah.
Like, how did that work out? Okay. I want to challenge him.
I did. He wants you to challenge him. So he would say, "Okay, you're not here anymore. How do you think it's going to work out? Maybe some people are going to be sad for a while. And you've done a lot to provide for people in your existence. They'll be sad, but they'll be okay.
Interesting.
And even
I'm sorry. I will say I do think that the universe is always working for us. So even the things, and you and I have talked about this, but even like the things in my life that I'm like, in the moment they were so awful, like they were good. No, they were actually like a good thing in the end.
Yeah.
Right.
So here's the thing, though. So here's what his point to me for the whole exercise that took weeks to really get through was, he said, "Look, you can either be the guy going through life with a big sticky note centered in your glass, no matter what comes up and pops you in the face, no matter what comes up and challenges you, whether it's in a case or in life. And you can have the attitude about it that says, everything is going to work out okay. This may hurt. This may be difficult. I may lose a case. I may have a problem. This might, whatever. This might feel devastating in the moment, but it's going to work out okay. You can either be that guy, or you can be the guy walking around worrying about things not working out." And he goes, "You've just spent several weeks looking for something over a 57-year life, and you haven't found one damn thing. So which one serves you better? Which sticky note?" And I'll tell you, since I've put that up, and so that was like the first conscious, I'm building my own damn sticky note. And I get to put my sticky note up. And I put that one, and he said, "You choose where on your glass you want to put it," right? I put that sucker front and center. And I've noticed how it's changed my life.
How has it?
Well, I mean, it's like even simple, even crazy, stupid things. Like I was running late as what to get
you can cuss
to
on the podcast.
Okay, thank you for
you're
my
welcome.
permission, Mom.
Letting it know.
But I was late. I was late getting to the airport. I screwed up timing wise. I thought I was going to miss the flight coming out here, and I felt everything kind of all the pressure ramping up. And I called my assistant. She said, "If you miss it, you're not getting out there today. Everything's sold out. Everything's crazy." I'm feeling it ramp up, and I start getting to the airport, and I've realized that I've got this little special parking place at the airport, but you need a pass to get through it. I notice I've left it in my wife's car. I'm like, everything's going. And then I just stopped. I said, everything's going to work out okay. Okay, so what happens if I miss the flight? In the big giant scope of things, who gives a crap, right? At the end of the day, who cares? It's all going to work out fine. And I know that seems silly, but to me, it's been profound.
No, it's not silly at all. I hate being late. So I hate, it goes back to like the control, right? Like we want to control things. And if like something is like out of our control and it's changing, we resist it, right? And it's just resisting life, really. And it's something that I work on. And I think traveling a lot has made it easier for me to say, yep, there's always going to be a delay or a cancellation or I'm going to miss a connection. Like I'm just going to factor it in. I'm going to try not to stress, not to like resist, because I think it's a really bad feeling to resist.
I think you can even go further. So that's the other piece of what he's already been coaching me on is this concept of anytime anything feels stressful at all, you ask yourself the question, what's great about this? What's great about this situation?
Okay? I like that.
And so, I was on another airplane and we've been delayed, and we're sitting on the tarmac and they come on and they say it's going to be another, hour, and people are just going, they're just pissed. And,
you need your own
I'm
plane.
Sitting there. I have my own plane, but I wasn't on that plane. I wasn't on my own plane.
I know you do that. Was like setting you up.
Yes, thank you. But I'm sitting there, and the guy who's sitting next to me looks at me and he goes, "Why are you like giggly?" I'm like, this is ridiculous. We've been delayed all these hours and blah blah blah. And I go, you know what's great about this? He goes, no, tell me what's great about this. And I said, do you see all those people outside the window? They're trying to make the airplane work. He goes, yeah, I see them. I said, I'm not one of them.
Oh my God.
I'm not one of those guys. Okay. I said, we're sitting here, we're in first class. People are worried about how we feel. They keep bringing us drinks. They're bringing us snacks. It's not so bad. I'm not even in a middle seat in the back. People, this doesn't suck. What's great about this, I get to go through the emails that I was going to have to go through when I got home. My wife was going to be pissed because I'm not paying attention to her because I'm trying to get through my damn emails. Now I can get this done and, ... So it's not so bad. And of course, look, and we've talked about it before, everything's about the focus. Where do you put your focus? Right? So I think what my coach is trying to teach me is, do you want to put your focus on worry? Worry is such a useless thing. It's like you're already giving energy to the negative thing that hasn't even happened yet, and it probably won't.
Right.
So you give all this energy to it, it probably won't. So he's telling me, do you want to be the guy walking through life looking for worrying about, looking for how it's not going to work out? And what I realized in this is what he's telling me to do in life is what I do in my cases. Because, I think you've heard me say, I've got some weird sayings for cases, but I always tell people in cases, I always say, how can they be the defense? How can they be 100% right and we still win? And the idea of it is it makes you think beyond the problems in your case. It makes you think, what's more important about this than the problem, right? That's how we win cases. That's my, to the degree that I have a secret sauce, that's my secret sauce.
How do you apply that to life?
So what he's asking me to do is apply it to life, to say something out there negative, you're worrying about something negative. Lawyers do that in their cases. They get so stuck on the negative something in the case, they can't sit there and say, what's great about this? What's great about this is the defense is going to overplay this card, and that's going to give me the ability to go get a verdict that's going to knock people's socks off, because they're going to overplay this, and I'm going to be able to go in and explain to the jury that that's not fair, right? So the narrative for the case changes. And so I think the whole thing for me is, I guess what I'm trying to say is I used to be much more of a worrywart, and I'm mindful of one of my paralegals a little while ago called me Chicken Little.
Why?
And I was like, I don't even know who Chicken Little is, but this does not sound... yeah, it's a cartoon, but I thought she was calling me chicken shit. And I was like, what the hell, man? You're my paralegal. Don't call me chicken shit. I don't think I'm chicken shit. She goes, no, Chicken Little. She turned red, and, I'm like, I don't know what Chicken Little is. So then they bought me the little children's book called Chicken Little. And Chicken Little is, anytime there's any little problem, the world's going to, the sky's going to fall down. That's what Chicken Little is. And so I'm not Chicken Little anymore. And it's kind of a cool thing. So anyway, that's the one of the profound things on the coaching side. And then we keep working on ego and subconscious and how ridiculously powerful those forces are.
And how's that going
in life? Good, but it's not easy to, it's like he'll say, you can't make your ego go away. You can tame certain things. You can retrain certain things.
And are you still super, super, super busy?
I am busy, but so, again, as we're talking about the coaching, his message to me is, I don't care what you do. I care why you do it. So I did 100 talks last year to lawyers. Crazy, right? And he says to me, I don't care if you do 100 talks, because the reason you're doing them is because that's how you feel like you're making a difference in the world. That's how that's you love doing it, Because if any part of why you're doing that is you need someone to come up to you and say, wow, that was awesome, that's messed up, because you're on a cycle there that's just you're never going to get off that hamster wheel. It's the idea of external validation, right? And so I'm still very much a work in progress.
But you're like super, I would assume, and maybe I'm wrong, but you're becoming like hyper aware of that.
I'm very aware of it, and it bothers me when I see myself doing things now that is attention seeking. I know that's ego. And so I'm like, damn, why do I need that? Like I wish that I could just flip that switch and not have the need. Like, some people who you just look at them and, they really don't give a shit. They do not care how other people think about them. There's times when I wish I was like that. Then there's other times when I'm like, glad I'm not really like that. Does that make sense?
Yes. I mean, I don't know that you would be who you are if you were like that. You would be a different person to some extent. So, like, how do you take it so far to not caring and still be you? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's back to this idea of how far does it serve you and when does it stop serving you?
And does it still feel good when people come up to you and tell you how great you are?
Well, you're assuming that happens a lot, but no, it does. And I've talked to my coach about that, and he said, well, when you're truly full, when you're full, then you can't be more full. And his crazy analogy was, do you like Thanksgiving? I said, yeah. He goes, let's say you've just had Thanksgiving dinner and you just pigged out, and you go to another friend's house, they're having Thanksgiving dinner, and they go, man, and you look at it and you go, this is the best turkey dinner I've ever seen in my life. The smell is off the chain. It's great. But you've just had a huge freaking meal, and you can't eat anymore. You're full. But they've invited you to sit down at the table, and it's I know it's not the best analogy, or maybe it is. That's the idea. You're already full. You're from an internal validation. You already know that you are good. You don't need somebody to come and tell you you're good. And the whole idea is, and this is what he says, and I believe this, to the degree that you give somebody the power to make you feel good, you give them the power to make you feel terrible. And so, and it's proportional.
Perfect sense, yes.
It's proportional. So here's the reality, and this is what he would tell me, because if somebody comes up to you and says, that was the worst frickin' presentation, you are a piece of shit.
I don't think anyone would dare.
But let's say it happened. He would say, are you really a piece of shit? You're no more or less a piece of shit because someone comes up to you and tells you that than you are the king of the universe. If someone comes up to you and says, you're the new king of, whatever, that doesn't make you the king of whatever. So the whole point is, he's trying to create more of an internal validation, an internal validation, I think is the best word, where we're trained from the beginning of life to need external validation. I mean, when you're a mom, okay, you've got a couple of jobs with your kids, right? You want to keep them alive. You want to teach them how to be decent human beings, and you're supposed to show them some unconditional love.
Yes.
But my bet, unless you're, Jen Gore has this crazy way she's bringing her kids up, which I think is incredible, trying to do it differently. But most people use the carrot and the stick approach when they're teaching their kid, right? To keep them alive and to teach them how to be decent humans. We're carrot and sticking them, right? And so they don't really feel that love as truly and completely unconditional.
I mean, I tell them, even when I'm mad, I'm like, I'm really mad at you right now, but I love you. There's nothing you can do that'll make me stop loving you. But I also tell them when they do something awesome, I'm like, are you proud of yourself? How does it make you feel? Like, I don't want it to come from me telling them. I've never told them, like, I wasn't that parent that's like, good job, good job, good job, good job. It's like, are you proud of you? How does it make you feel? What did you like about that?
I think that's great.
Because I do worry about the whole external validation.
Well, you're
thing.
doing a much better job than other people.
And I'm not
typically.
perfect at it. Every now and then a good job slips out, but
I know.
am
and sometimes
aware.
it's on video even. Sometimes I see it.
Well, those...
just saying. I mean, sometimes I see it on video. On your, like, what do you call it? The feed thing.
The Instagram feed?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, those are just...
I'm teasing.
I'm just messing with them.
But what I'm not teasing about is that's where it starts. I mean, what we do is we as little people, we are only as good as mommy tells me I am at the beginning. And as daddy tells me I am, and then that becomes, I'm only as good as my teacher says and my friends say, and so it is very much, we're trained to need external validation. I mean, that's how society controls us. That's how our families control us. That's how our schools control us. We're trained that way. For me, it's kind of eye-opening, the whole thing we talked about earlier with everything working out, because I never really sat and thought about it that way. I never thought, okay, really, I mean, these are all sticky notes, right? I mean, I now catch myself anytime that somebody says something or I tell myself something that sounds like a rule. I go, okay, that's a sticky note. And what that means to me is it's not necessarily true. I've accepted it as true, right? So I have the ability, if I want to, I can pull that sticky note off my glass wall and look at it and say, first, is this always true or not? And most of the time it's not always true, like universally true. So you get the lawyer, it depends, when you look at it. And you go, okay, so how can I, does this serve me to like pretend like it always is true? Or is it serve me better to kind of rewrite this a little bit in a way that serves? And some people might look at this and say, well, Joe, you're just playing a semantic game.
Mm-hmm.
It is to some degree a semantic game, but guess what? Whoever you are that thought that, so are you playing a semantic game. I mean, we're all telling ourselves a story all the time, right? And so if you have the power to tell yourself stories that serve you and humanity, or you have the power to believe stories that don't, and neither one of them are more or less true, then which one are you going to pick?
Yeah, why not? I agree. I think it's a perfect analogy for a couple of reasons, because it touches on a couple of different things that I believe in. So one is that we pick up beliefs and they don't serve us and we don't really truly believe them. But it's just like part of our programming at this point, and we have to like reprogram. So number two is that ability to reprogram and change our beliefs. But number three, you touched on this at the very beginning. It touches on empathy. Because if we are aware that whatever someone's clear box is, and they have a ton of, sticky notes all over it, like you said, what caused them to have those sticky notes? And that's just empathy. It's like, okay, they're reacting to me a certain way, or they're a certain way. Well, something shaped them to be that way. So it's like having empathy as to why are they like this.
I agree. And look, I mean, so like one of the examples that was given to me was this guy. So he's in the grocery store, and there's a mom, and she's pushing her little girl around in a cart, and she's clearly not having a good day. and the kid reaches out for something and she kind of slaps her hand, and like she's, every time the kid does something that she's yelling at the kid, and so he's watching and he's like seeing the lynch mob of human beings forming, like, and you're hearing words like calling defects and I can't believe that lady, she doesn't deserve to have a daughter, and da 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 da, and he said, so that's all of these people's sticky notes, right? And the question is, do those sticky notes serve? And not only serve them, but do they serve humanity? And this goes right to your empathy comment. He said, by contrast, what he did is he sat there and he sat back and he said, what would my sticky notes have to be? In other words, like you're saying, what would my experiences have to have been? What would my beliefs have to be? What would my struggles have to be? That are all sticky notes. But what would they have to be in order for me to think that's okay? For me to act like that lady is acting toward that child? And what it allowed him to do, and this is the empathy piece, is he walked up to her instead of, I'm pissed at you and I want to call defects and I want to judge you. He walked up to her and he said, look, it seems to me like you're having a really hard day. How can I help? Can I help? Is there something I can do to help? And of course, then she tells him her whole life story. It's not worth getting into all that here, but he was able to make a positive impact on somebody else's life because he didn't allow his sticky notes to become this mechanism towards judgment. And again, like like we talked about before, to the degree you give somebody else the power to make you feel good, you give them the power to destroy you, right? It's also true that to the degree that that you can withhold judgment against other people, you can also learn to withhold judgment against yourself, which is, of course, another big, huge thing that we could have a whole nother session on, right?
Absolutely.
This self-hate stuff that starts to happen.
Right. And the other thing is, with the whole box, you also learn to not take things personally. Because again, they're viewing life, people, through their own lenses. So I just think that analogy is so perfect in so many different ways. And I think we've talked about this before, how like one of my kids is so judgmental towards others, but at the end of the day, he's the most judgmental towards himself.
That they go together.
Right. And then I have the other child who is the complete opposite. So like he doesn't judge others, so he never thinks he's being judged. So he can be himself all the time. He can laugh at himself. He can make jokes. He's a little comedian. And they just see the world so differently.
Yeah.
And to me, it's crazy. It's like it's the same household.
Right.
You know?
It's, as you know, I mean, I have 4 kids and we've had challenges and wonderful things with all of them. But I learned a lot of things with one of my sons who is in recovery, and it was they were very, very tough times. But what your comment made me think about is sitting there in meetings, meetings for people who are addicts or are related to them, or dealing with them, or that they're part of life, right? And probably, undoubtedly, people listening to this, some will have been there or are there now. And I remember listening to my son tell about instances in his life, and I'm like, that didn't happen. Like that didn't happen in my house.
That sounds like my mother.
So I'm like, I went home and I talked to my wife. I'm like, did he grow up in a different house than I was, the dad in? I mean, I don't remember that at all. And what struck me, at first I thought, lying, manipulative, lying addict, right? I mean, that was my judgment. And then I realized, I don't think he was in that moment. There are plenty of times when he was being very manipulative. But in those moments, I think that was his internalization of his reality. I mean, that was his
That's so scary.
Reality. And it is scary. I saw your eyes when I said this, and I think you think of your kids and you think.
Well, I also think of like my childhood, because I don't think we've ever talked about this, but my mom like completely denies my childhood. This is like literally the issue between her and I and I'm like, in a weird way, I'm like, I almost think she believes that these things didn't happen. And then subsequently things happened as an adult between her and I that like my husband was present, right? And then like she denies them years later, and I'm like, okay, this is just a pattern. And I'm like, I'm glad. So it's funny, like going back to the universe is always serving you. Like these experiences that I had with her as an adult that were not pleasant, they helped me understand that I wasn't crazy as a child.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, well, at least now this is like the good that came from it. Right. So, I mean, that happened in my house where I'm literally like, hey, this stuff happened. And she's like, that never happened. And I'm like, yes, it did.
Right. And so that was the point I was making is then I came to the realization, well, maybe some of these things actually happen and it's me the one who just isn't seeing life. I mean, I'm so the bottom line is we're always telling ourselves a story. And so what's the truth? Who the hell knows?
That's so
and it doesn't
scary,
even
though.
matter, though.
And it scares me for my kids, too, because I'm like, how are they going to, like, our house is an
You're
entire
messing
house.
them up.
Yeah,
we're all
I
messing them
know,
up.
I know.
You know?
I'm like,
they're going to
aware.
need therapy. We all need therapy. So
Yeah, no, I know.
you know, you
This
can
is
do
like
the best.
this is a stressful conversation.
Well, it is, but guess what? Everything always works out in the end.
That is true.
You know,
They'll
I
figure
had
it out, right?
I had the ultimate test of it. Not thankfully in my personal life. I sat with a friend of mine not long ago who lost a child to suicide.
Oh my God.
I sat with him. I said, "How would it sound to you? Would it sound terrible to you for me to say?" I was telling him about some coaching, and I said, "Would it sound terrible if I said to you everything always works out?" And he goes, "No, it doesn't. It doesn't sound terrible because it's I believe it. This hurts like hell right now, but we'll get through it. I mean, the sun will come out tomorrow. There's nothing more painful than I've ever experienced, and nothing more painful that I think I could ever experience than this. But I know there is a piece of me that sees that it will be all right." And I was like, wow, so if he can say that to me, then, you know, what the hell? I mean, my stuff has been nothing, you know? And so, I don't know. It's been a pretty profound thing to sit there. And I would challenge anybody listening to this, try it. You know, start looking, if you look at life, I mean, ask yourself the question, are you willing to look at life and say, I'm willing to, until somebody proves me otherwise, you know, I'm willing to look at life with kind of this front and center sticky note that says it's going to work out. And what that means is the way it plays out is stuff comes and punches you in the face. Life comes and punches you in the face in some way. The question is going to be, do you at that point, do you go to a place inside and start to worry about it and start to obsess about it and start to look for all the ways that this can take everything apart that you've worked so hard for and, you know, blah, 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 and destroy your relationships and destroy your whatever? Or can you look at it and say, you know what? It hurts like hell. This is going to be tough. But, you know, in 10 years, I'm going to look back on this and it's not going to be life-defining, or even it is life-defining. It's going to be life-defining in some way that has a positive lining around it. Like what you were saying earlier, the things that were the toughest ended up even right then, and were good things. Can we look at it that way? And it's all between your ears. The crazy thing is we don't believe that we have the power to choose. The thing is that the thing about this whole thing that we've been talking about is people don't believe they have the power to choose how they feel. They don't think they have the power to choose what their beliefs are.
But it's hard. I think you do have the power, but I think it's like anything in life. It requires work, and I think people are just not willing to do the work to then find out if it works or not.
I think I'm going to say it a little different. I think people are afraid to do the work.
Because then if it doesn't work out?
No, what if I've been believing something that's bullshit? What if my life has been held back for all this time? What if I've judged other people in ways that are inappropriate?
But we have.
Wrong?
I mean, we're
we
human.
do. Right. We do.
Oh, like parenting is like the best like teaching ever. Like I judged parents for so long until I had kids. And even when I had babies, I would judge parents with like older kids. Oh, look at like them on their iPad or this and that. And like it all just went out the window. Right? It's like
Boy, do I know that feeling.
And now like my friends that are like super judgy, that when they didn't have kids, when they like called me and told me like, oh, I'm pregnant, I just laughed like hysterically.
It's
like
coming,
I cannot wait.
I can't wait.
No,
to
literally.
see,
And they're
right?
like, and I even told them like, oh, I can't wait. Like this is going to be so much fun.
I'm gonna videotape this.
Oh, I love it. It's like, and it's like mean, but I don't care. It's like, I felt so judged so many times. I was the first to have kids out of my friends, that now it's like payback.
Yes. Well, I agree. I mean, I learned so much from my kids. I still do. At each stage, and now my kids are like, my youngest is 17 and getting ready to go off to school. And I'm thinking, all right, so, my oldest is almost 30. And so I've seen, the relationships change, like, so you're first you're a parent to young kids. They're relying on you for everything, and you're, And then at some point, you go through these teenage years where they're tumultuous. And,
Oh God, I'm not looking forward to that.
Yeah.
I'm like stressing already.
I get it. But, it's kind of what you start to realize, wait, that's kind of like, all right, so that's what's supposed to happen. It's supposed to be, yeah, I'm supposed to learn how to let go of my role of being the hovering parent who always, or whatever, not hovering, but you get what I mean.
No, I get it. And they say that it's like normal for teens to be so rebellious because they're learning to be their own person. And
they're learning, but so are you. You're having to learn how to let them be that.
I'm not looking forward to it.
That's the part that I'm trying to bring to surface is it's always a bilateral learning experience. Like when you said before, I'm homeschooling and they're going to learn this. I'm sitting there going, yeah, Maria, you're in for an education of your own. Well, I'm not going to be doing it. Yeah, you are. You're freaking homeschooling. It's different. You're changing from the norm. And so you're going to learn some things from this too. And that's great. I'm not saying that to you to worry you. I think it's great. You're going to learn some awesome things. You'll also be confronted with some things that you wouldn't otherwise be confronted with. So all of them are opportunities for you to now go, okay, cool. I get to do this, right? And that's what I would say to you, because I know you would say this to me if I was crunching up like you are right now, thinking about this. The question is, do you want to look at this and say, I get to, versus, oh shit, I have to?
No.
Right?
And I am of the belief if I get to, my daughter was sick like 4 weeks ago and my husband was out of town, and it was just like so difficult. And I remember switching her from one room to the other because it's a long story why, but it was like middle of the night and I'm carrying her and I'm going to the other room, and that's exactly what I thought. I'm going to cry. I thought I'd get to do this with her.
Yeah. And I see you're emotional about it, and I get that.
Yeah.
I think about all these times when I looked at what I had to do as this terrible inconvenience of having to, now I got to drive my kid here, or now it's going to take 3 hours to do this or that or the other thing. And I think back on those times and say, well, what precious times. I wish I had had the foresight to, understand that.
Well, yeah, she's my baby. So I'm like, how many more times will I get to carry her from one room to the next? And like, I have her with me, like she's alive.
Amazing.
She's here, And I don't think that I would think about it that way. Like 5 years ago with like my then 5-year-old who's 10 now. I don't think that I looked at it that way.
Right. Be a little harder to carry him from room to room though now, right?
I can't carry him.
Yeah, that's the point. Right?
I mean, he's almost my height.
Right. And you think back on it, you go, when did it change? What was that day when it changed?
Yes.
And so it's that, you don't know when the last time you're going to get to do things. And, I mean, you're very much involved in the same world I am, in the legal world, and you're doing it from a marketing side. I'm doing it from a lawyer side. But both of us are in service of human beings at the end of the day who go through terrible life challenges, right? I mean, that's what you're marketing to, to help lawyers do those kind of things. And I'm doing those kind of cases. And so we're both in that same field. of people's tragedies. And so one of the things that gives us is a perspective.
It does.
No, my firm is, I'm proud of my firm. My firm is, we're based out of Atlanta. Now we have 9 lawyers, which is bigger than I've ever thought we'd be.
Do they all go to trial?
Yeah, they're all, we have one lawyer, Nathan Gaffney, who is, I call him my lawyer. He keeps me between the lines on the legal side so that I can be more on the human side, frankly. So I don't, his background, I'm singling him out because his background is a little bit unique in that he comes from kind of an appellate trial background. So he really is focused more on the legal side. So he wouldn't go, of all the lawyers we have, he's the only one who wouldn't go to trial directly as his own lead counsel. So he is, but he does go to trial with me, and he's instrumental in every case I'm involved in all the legal aspects of them. And since we do cases all over the place, at last count, I was up to 43 states, which is kind of crazy that I've done cases in. Nathan has the important job of keeping me knowing what the law is in any given state that I'm in. So it's not, because there are significant differences from state to state, and even choosing where a case should be brought. When you have options, a lot of work goes into figuring out which laws are going to be best for a given case when you have a choice. But the firm is all focused on primarily commercial motor vehicle cases, although we do end up in some other ones that we get pulled into and that we feel like we're the right people for. You've heard me say it before. I don't think it's a coincidence what lawyer gets what case. I think that's the universe talking. And so even at this conference that you and I are at, I talked to people the other day from the stage, and I said, I looked at people in the eye and said, that case that's sitting in your office, it's your case too. I mean, that case, the theme of our talk here is that it's bilateral, right? If you allow it. The case comes into your life to teach you a lesson as well. And maybe that lesson is something about empathy, maybe something about your life, maybe about something about the relationships that you're not tending to, that you get to see an outcome, and it hopefully opens your eyes. And I don't think you're ready to finish the case, whether it's with a settlement or a trial, until you have figured out why that case came to you as a lawyer. But we jumped off the subject. But at the end of the day, our firm, we're about handling commercial motor vehicles the best way we can, and helping other lawyers around the country be the best lawyers that they can be for their clients. So a lot of us are involved in teaching, writing books, doing seminars, and then helping people privately.
Where are you licensed?
I'm licensed in Georgia, Florida, Tennessee, New York, and Texas. And all of the other states I would have gotten admitted, ProHack into.
How come you don't?
Take more. It's a great question. I mean, it's kind of a pain in the butt, that.
And you're so busy as it is. And typically there's you're brought in, so there's someone that is.
Yeah, or if I get a case and I'm not licensed there, I'll bring someone in.
It's pretty simple.
These days, the plaintiff's bar is a very congenial bar, and we work together pretty well. So I can always find somebody locally, bring me in. And by contrast, states, each state has their own rules with regard to being admitted there. And so there's a lot of reciprocity. I mean, I could go get a lot more state licenses without even taking a test, but then I have to keep up with all of their continuing education requirements and keep up with all of their, unique stuff that ends up needing to get filed every year, and you have to keep up with all of it. And,
I didn't know that. Yeah, that they were all, but it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, so when I come to a conference like this one that we're at, I fill out 5 CLE forms, one for each state that I'm involved in.
So you can't do the same ones for all states, like or you can.
Well, you have to submit them all separately, and so there's
Oh, I
different.
see.
Yeah.
Okay.
So each state kind of controls their own state bar, and the requirements. And some states allow reciprocity. So like once you practiced for a little while, if you're in, if like I didn't take the New York bar. I just applied as a Georgia lawyer who had enough experience, number of years, and then you have to pass their kind of background checks and all that kind of stuff. And if you meet all the requirements, you just go up and get sworn in. But then from the minute you get sworn in, you are a full-fledged New York lawyer, which means you have to follow the exact specific rules that govern any other New York lawyer. So you have to know them, and you have to follow them, and you have to comply with all of the filing requirements and things like that. So 5 is enough.
I wonder who has the most.
I'm sure some people have a lot.
That's funny. Okay, one last question. I'm just curious, like, what's next for you? Like, what are you either trying to accomplish or working towards?
I'm working on 2 things now significantly. One is to continue to work on some of the things we talked about last time, continuing to advance my understanding and my ability to teach about emotional state control and how that should be changing the way law is practiced.
Oh, yes, I forgot to ask you about this. Like, how is that going? Any new breakthroughs on that?
It's going well. It's slowed down a little bit in terms of my ability to spend time on it because it's been a busy last 6 months. So in the last few weeks, I've kind of blown the dust off a few things and gotten some things cranked back up. But I was doing a course where I was starting to teach it with another lawyer named Chris Stombaugh, and I purposefully stopped it because I think that we need to spend more time on the development side and kind of get it a little bit more ready before we teach. And
have you taught it to anyone yet? You have, right?
I have, yeah.
And have they tried it and come back and said?
Yeah, it's been pretty neat. We've actually had a few people take it to trial and do things, and they were really, really pleased with the outcomes. And so, the challenge with any of this, and we're kind of talking in code if anybody hasn't listened to the last session, but the problem, what we're trying to do is sort of to understand how emotional states impact things within the legal environment, whether it's in a deposition or at a trial or in an interview of somebody or whatever. And then we want to see if we can influence that. And what we've learned is that you can influence it. And the challenge is, by the way, the way you influence it is by influencing your own state.
You know what came to mind right now when you were saying, have you ever had the situation where somebody starts giggling like uncontrollably and next thing you know, you're laughing?
You're about to start.
Yeah. Isn't that like, that's exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. That would be a great example.
It just came to me while you were talking.
And the other thing that I'm working on now is I'm building a program that's designed for young women who want to be trial lawyers. I'm probably genetically not competent to do this, but I've got a daughter who's just finished her first year of law school. And for a long time, I think you do know through the organizations that I'm involved in, I've been a big proponent of trying to advance women within the field. And what I've realized not long ago is how too many women have, I think, the wrong impression of what it takes to be a good trial lawyer. And their impression is very male dominated. So they look and too many of them give up their power because they think they have to be more masculine.
Which is interesting because women are naturally more empathetic.
Like on steroids more.
Right.
But what I'm trying to do is I'm building a program, and I think it's going to end up being about 14 months long.
Nice.
And the idea is going to be I want to pour everything I've learned, as much as what I've learned, into this, into women coming out of school who want to do this for a living. I want to teach them about emotional state control. I want to teach because for a woman it's it's the same in many regards, but it's different in other regards in terms of emotional state control. How do you want to show up, Maria? And do you and what fears do you have about how you show up in the world, right? And let's talk about this. Let's give it dialogue, but let's also help women deal with whatever other issues are getting in their way of being the best them that they can be. So let's bring a to the degree that in some case it might be appropriate, let's bring a stylist in to help somebody feel better about their appearance. Let's bring a vocal person in who can help with voice and let's bring a movement person in to help women learn how to not present themselves as small if they want to and when they want to, and also not have to come across as masculine. Not for them. I don't know. I'm stumbling over my words, and I hope nobody takes this inappropriately. But my observations are that a lot of women have been given the wrong message about what it is, or they've accepted the wrong message about how they can best present as lawyers. And so I want to deal with those things. At the same time, I want to pour into them all of the things I've learned about strategy and all of the things I've learned about just lawyering, so that we can just have these, badass people out there doing this and increasing empathy in our field. And, they'll do a better job than I will. They'll do a better job than if we teach. And I think that what this program could do is shorten the learning curve. I know it sounds like shorten it. Well, you just said 14 months, but I want to pack 14 years into 14 months, so that you get through this program and you know what you're doing to go into a courtroom. And it's not something you can learn in a weekend. You know how much teaching I do.
Yeah.
And even when I used to teach at the Trial Lawyers College, places where people would go for 3 weeks solid, you came out, you're still a neophyte. You go out and now you're back in the real world. And it's like, holy crap, I don't know what the hell, what do I do now?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think this is going to be good, and I'm very close to starting to roll it out. So,
I think it's really tough for women because there's this weird, I don't know if dichotomy is the right word, but it's like, well, if you have too strong of a character, you're a bitch. And it's like, there's this like fine line of like, I would assume a trial lawyer that's a female wants to be authoritative enough and confident enough. But I think women are constantly afraid of being seen as, she's just being a bitch. But when the male counterpart does the same things, it's like, oh, they're a man.
It's a dual standard, right? And it's self-perpetuated, and I totally agree with you. I think that, for some women, taking a hard line approach, is so like you get deemed a bitch if you're tough, right? But even the idea of being tough, sometimes the toughest one of you is not someone who bows up. It's the one who actually responds from empathy.
Like saying it's okay to not have to be like portray being that tough.
Yeah, you don't have to. What is tough? Tough is tough may look very different with a feminine lens on it than what we think of as tough in a courtroom is thought of from a very male perspective, I think. So I think women feel like they have to act in a certain way that's not even innately how they are.
I get it. And what you're saying is, because if everything you teach and like what you do in court is to be more empathetic and vulnerable,
right?
Then it almost sounds like women are more suited.
They're much more. Look, y'all, there's no question that they are.
So if they just stop thinking I have to be the way that like TV portrays a lawyer.
And it's the lawyer they have in their head. They've put a lawyer in their head that's that's not who they are, but they think they have to be that lawyer in order to be effective. And so, like, I was talking to a young woman yesterday after my talk here, and I told her, I said, let me challenge you on something. I said, let's consider this for a second. You look out in front of you, and I said, so right here on the right is this lawyer who's doing everything perfectly. They're dressed perfectly, their hair is perfect, everything's perfect, right? And over here on the left, there's a lawyer who can barely get the words out of her mouth. She's struggling. Her eyes are welling up, her lip quivers. You can tell how much she loves her client. You can tell she's just trying to get the message out. But she's not anywhere near as polished as perfect person over here. Who wins? I mean, who do you want to, if you're on a jury, who do you want to help? Do you want to help perfect person? Or do you want to help the person who you know loves their client and they're struggling like crazy to get you the message? They're working really hard to get it out to you, but they're the underdog.
I mean, I would hope the latter, but I don't know how.
I think
you would know better.
I guess I'm saying I hope the latter too. I think from my experience, it's the latter. I think from my life experience, I want the damn perfect person to trip over their damn shoelace. I want them to skin their pretty little knee. I want them to not to be so freaking perfect. I want to take them down a notch and make them feel like I feel. Because guess what? I don't feel perfect. And I don't really love...
The jury must be able to sense that. And since nobody's perfect,
humans.
They're going to relate to the non-perfect person.
Right. That's
Makes
right.
Sense?
And so what is more powerful? I think what's more powerful is not perfect.
Absolutely.
And so that what I asked her when she said, absolutely, just like you, I think that was her word. I said, so why do you try so hard to be perfect? Because that's what I was taught to do. I said, exactly.
But you think she was taught that in law school or taught that as a child?
She's taught that in life. I think we're all taught that,
I think so
right?
Too. Okay.
I mean, the guys taught that. Everybody's taught that. But it's one of the many, many things that's counterintuitive. It's like what lawyers, I'm kind of doing the speed trial thing, right? And it's not really about speed, it's about clarity. But lawyers are taught to put up as many theories in a case as they possibly can and put up as much evidence as they possibly can to win a case. And that's, frankly, I think it's absurd because you're taught in law school to be an issue spotter. And what that basically means is they give you the fact pattern and they want you to spot every issue in the whole thing. And they want you to be as creative as possible in that. Like the more off the wall creative you are, the more points you get. Well, try that in a courtroom. And people are going to look at you like you're batshit crazy or worse. They're certainly not going to think you're credible. And they're going to feel like they're getting their time wasted and they're going to go check out and they're going to have to listen.
That's what I was going to ask you. Like, do people get bored? Like, does the jury get bored?
Oh my gosh. There's never been a jury that hasn't been bored. And yet I feel like I'm surprised we don't have to still put powdered wigs on to go into court because cases are tried like they were not only 20 years ago, but 100 years ago.
And now people are used to not being bored because they have a cell phone.
But guess what? That's taken away from you.
I know. So now they're sitting there.
They're jonesing for their cell phone.
It actually gives me anxiety just thinking about it.
So you're because you know why? But part of the reason is not only are you addicted to it, but it's become the modern day blankie, right? If God forbid something happened with one of your kids, or your husband, or whatever, somebody important in your life, something big happened, and somebody needed to get in touch with you. They can get in touch with you with your damn phone.
Yes.
Right? Now it's gone. In a very short time, you're going to go, oh my gosh, what if something's going on?
Well, that happens to me on planes when randomly there isn't Wi-Fi. In Mexico, half the planes don't have Wi-Fi yet. And I'm like, oh my God, 2 hours. I hope everything's okay.
Imagine that. You're a juror, right? You walk into a courtroom. You don't want to be there.
No, and they took that away from you.
So number one, you're a captive. You frickin' don't want to be there. Yeah, you're pissed because you're sitting there going, I should have just lied on that damn jury questionnaire and said, I hate all so and so kind of people, and then they would have thrown me off as being an ist. some kind of an ist, right?
Yeah.
And I should have done that, and then I wouldn't be here. And now I'm the only one stupid enough to not have done that, and that's why I'm freaking here. I'm with these 12 other stupid people who didn't do it. Everybody else was smarter than we were. So you're pissed. Now they go, take your cell phone, and by the way, is that an iWatch? Oh, take that off too. Put it all in this basket. We'll give it back to you at the end of the day.
Sounds like a fucking punishment.
It sounds like a punishment, but it also sounds like you're back in third grade. Do I have to raise my hand to go potty? Yes, you do, actually. You can't just get up and go potty. You're going to have to let us know, and we're going to have to take a whole break just for you so that you can go potty.
Wow.
Okay? So you can't just get up.
Well, because you could miss something.
Right? You can't get up and leave. It's back to freaking third grade, and you're stuck in there. And then you have a lawyer getting up and droning on about shit you don't give a damn about, and you don't even see and understand why it's relevant to anything, because they don't tell you until the very end of the case what the rules are that you're supposed to even judge the case based on. The jury charges in most states, you don't get them until the very end. So
Why?
you're listening to all the facts of the case, and you don't even know what the hell you're supposed to be doing.
Wait, why?
Because that's the way it's done.
But
because
for what reason?
Our forefathers said so.
Oh. But what's like the I'm just curious, like what is the
There
reason?
isn't a reason.
Oh,
That's
okay.
the formality of, I mean, somebody will tell you, they'll make something up, but there's not, it's just the formality of things. We give you the charge at the end. For people who aren't lawyers, a lot of them may not even know, the judge usually doesn't even have what's called a charge conference, which is where the lawyers talk to the judge about the jury charge until a couple of days before the jury charge, and oftentimes the day before the jury charge is given. So, nobody knows what the judge is going to even tell the jury until then in terms of what the law is. You know a little bit. You can predict it because there's certain standards that happen, but it doesn't always work out that way. So there's all kinds of things. And then, you have lawyers who come in, and instead of, there's a doctor who's coming in to talk about, the doctor comes in who's an orthopedist on a case. And the lawyer puts the orthopedist up, and then they've been taught to personalize that orthopedist to the jury. So they start talking about, where'd you go to high school? Who gives a shit where the damn orthopedist went to high school? Where'd you go to medical school? Guess what? Nobody gives a shit of that either. In most of the cases, all they care about is your first name doctor? Yeah, great. Tell me about the frickin' medicine, right? So by the time they even get to the first issue, the jury is like gone to the Amazon in their mind. And they're shopping. They're thinking about how are they going to make dinner happen?
Oh,
Who's
absolutely.
picking up the kids? I hope so-and-so didn't forget this. And by the way, I'm not going to know if they did or didn't because nobody can text me and I can't text them to remind them about, blah, 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 blah. And so all the neurotic people are having conniptions, but you're sitting there and you got to sit there and listen to somebody drone on and on.
Assuming I'm even listening.
You're not listening. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
You've gone.
I know myself
checked
well
out.
enough to know that it'd have to be something really interesting for me to not tune out.
Yeah. And so I've got.
Or I would be like, okay, I want to make sure I convince everyone of my point of view, so I'm going to listen and like.
Well, but that's why my theory of trial is my theory of cases is that two things. One, the hero of the story always has to be the juror. Most lawyers think the hero of the story has to be the client. The hero of the story is the juror, because the juror is the only one who can make something happen, right? They get to write the end of the story. The juror gets to write it.
That would motivate me to listen.
Right? So that's one. The second thing is that the case has to be about the juror. Steinbeck one time said something like, if the story is not about the listener won't listen.
It makes perfect sense.
Okay. So that's why it's different to say, let me tell you about a crash case. And the crash case happened 3 years ago to this person you've never met before, and this is what she went through. All right, how you might have some empathy for that person, but it's going to be, you're a human. By comparison, let's say I talk about, this case is about a truck crash, but you know what it's really about? This trucking company runs 50 trucks through your community every week. And when I was investigating this crash 3 years ago, I determined that trucking company has a really ugly safety problem. And it's still doing it. And it's going to keep doing it until and unless y'all tell them to stop.
Yeah, that's more
Okay.
powerful. Because now you're thinking about you and your
Now
children
it's
and your husband.
right.
And
It's all about you. So at the end of the day, we are human animals, and human animals are very self-serving, very selfish, very self-directed creatures. So,
or like any case involving a child, I would like pay attention. Because I can relate because I have children.
But you hear what you just said.
Yes, I'm agreeing
Not
with you.
Not because of that child,
No.
but because you have children.
I'm agreeing with you.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
1,000%. Make it about that and I would be like...
That's right. Mama Bear's going to protect her kids.
I really do appreciate you.
And I appreciate you. I'm glad that you and I are friends.
Me too.
I think really highly of you.
Likewise.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you so much to Joe Freed for everything he shared with us today. I am really so grateful that he took the time to come back on the podcast. Now, if you found this story valuable, please share it with someone you want to see succeed. Subscribe so you never miss an episode and leave a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping others discover the show.